Good evening. Today we will be taking a look at the A280. I've spent some time with this weapon, and then I spent some more time with this weapon because I didn't feel like I was ready to review it, and it's pretty good. We're gonna get into this. It's gonna be weird. Sorry if I sound a little winded or something like that. I wasn't exercising. I had just finished like a pound of calamari, homemade of course, thank you. And yeah, so we're feeling bloated. But the A280 is a medium-range rifle which fires in 3 blast bursts. This sturdy weapon was widely used by the Rebellion during the Galactic Civil War. Cooling power is middle ground. Range is, again, I would say the cooling power is slightly above mid, range slightly above mid, rate of fire a couple notches below mid, and damage is smack dab in the middle just about. Compared to the previous blaster, which is the standard issue blaster, it has cooling power is lower, not a lot lower, like 1 tick lower. So when I say tick, I'm talking about the square boxes here, but it's like a tick lower. The range is 1 tick higher, rate of fire is 1 tick lower, and damage is 1 tick lower. So overall it would be considered worse, but I think 1 tick doesn't really make that much difference, and I think the difference that you have is that it's a 3 blast burst, so I think it's per blast, like each round, or I don't know, laser, I guess, would do that much damage, I'm pretty sure. I don't think it's counting the entire burst. The one thing that the A280 has going for it over the standard issue blaster is the mods. I think that's one of the big things for it. It has 3 mods that you can equip, whereas standard blaster doesn't have any. The mods are dual zoom, which is a macro scope that can toggle between 2 magnification levels while zooming. A improved cooling, which is a power cell that greatly increases the time there's no belt. I just read that wrong. It's a power cell that greatly increases the time the blaster can be fired before requiring to be cooled down. And then it has improved range, which is an extended barrel that greatly enhances the bolt to maintain high damage over greater distances. And this was a big benefactor to this weapon, specifically the improved range, because from what I know, it doesn't increase the damage. I don't think it does. I haven't looked on any wikis and I haven't really Googled it. This is just from personal experience, and that's how I'm reviewing this, is personal experience of using this. And originally I didn't have it unlocked, and I was going to make this review without having it unlocked, but I was like, why would I do that? Why not actually use the gear? I'm reviewing the gosh darn weapon, so I might as well actually use it. And the improved range genuinely makes this way more fun to use and just kind of better, in my own opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's just a placebo effect. So the problem is that the dual zoom, originally I had the dual zoom mod on and I had the improved cooling on, and the improved cooling, it's basically just like an extended mag. You could just fire more before having to reload, which is just a benefit. But the dual zoom allows you to, well, use a scope. If you don't have the dual zoom on, you can't ADS with this. Like you can, aim, like you can aim with it, but you can't aim down sights. And again, if you don't really play Battlefront 2, I'm surprised you're watching this video, to be honest. But if you don't, weapons that have scopes, you can look down the scope, and weapons that don't have scopes, you can't. You kind of third person aim just a little tighter. Like you aim, like you kind of zoom in, but you don't really zoom into a scope. Whereas if you have a scope, you can look through the scope, like actually look through it in first person. And if you don't have dual zoom on, you actually can't aim down the scope at all. The scope is still on there, you just can't use it at all for some reason. Maybe it's my game's just broken, and maybe you are supposed to use a scope, but from what I know, I don't think you could actually use the scope. The dual zoom, I never toggled between the other magnification level because I didn't know what it was binded to. I literally never used it. Again, the scope wasn't bad, but after unlocking the improved range, which is the extended barrel that enhances the bolt to maintain high damage over larger distances, I would use that, and I would use the improved cooling, and it just felt a million times better. Yeah, you don't have the scope on, but who cares? I'm playing in third person most of the time anyway. Not like you really need the scope, not really like I need sights to look down anyway. Really, I mean, like, it's nice to have the sights. Some people might prefer it depending on if you want to like kind of snipe with it a bit, which I could see people wanting to use it. I just prefer the improved range overall. So again, if we're looking at a lot of the strong points of this weapon, I think it's the fact that it has mods compared to the standard issue rifle. Another strong point, or something that could be considered a more of a strong point to this weapon, is the 3 blast burst that it has compared to the previous weapon, the standard issue blaster, where the standard issue is full auto and you could just keep firing. It's not surprisingly, the rate of fire is higher than the A280, but it doesn't feel like it's firing as many bullets because it doesn't have like a burst fire mode, whereas the A280, you're getting every time you fire, you're shooting 3 bursts at a time, whereas the standard issue blaster, you're firing 1 bolt at a time. And yeah, you can, you know, fire a decent amount of shots with it, but I think the 3 bursts just really helps it more because you could land those 3 shots and get a lot of damage off, especially if you're hitting headshots. Headshots are a big thing with this. If you hit headies, my god, you're doing big damage. You could really take out some bigger people and just overall do a lot of damage with this rifle. Weaknesses aside, you know, good points aside, weaknesses, I don't want to say it really has any weaknesses, and we're gonna get into some weapons that have weaknesses. I think one of its one of the bigger weaknesses is you can't really go toe-to-toe with snipers, even though, you know, you look at this and it is medium range, which is fine, but you look at the dual zoom and you would expect, oh, okay, you put on a dual zoom and maybe you could deal with snipers, and, you know, potentially if you have the improved range with the dual zoom on, you might be able to do more against people sniping, but it just takes too many shots and you're not gonna land every single shot, and if you are able to, well, then you're just like a 1% or good for you. I'm so glad that you're good at the game. But other than that, jokes aside, other than that, you're not really going to be able to go toe-to-toe at like long range, even if you tried. Again, you could put out damage and potentially get some kills, but against like a full-on sniper player, you're not really going to do much against them. They're going to have the upper hand on you. Medium range, you're going to do pretty well for the most part. Most players are going to do pretty well against. You're probably going to have some problems against more of the heavy class, so LMG, you know, type users. You're gonna have a little bit of trouble with them, but again, you know, I feel like most classes have trouble with them. It's gonna be a bit of a problem to deal with them. And then overall, you could deal with most people pretty well, like officers and stuff, and other assault class users. You should be able to deal with them fine. This thing really does excel at a medium to range, like as it says, it's a medium range rifle, and it really does excel at medium range, to be honest. You could take out people pretty well, especially if they're not really looking at you or if you catch them by surprise. Even at close range, it is pretty decent. For the most part, you could do some really decent damage with it. Another weak point that I feel like it has compared to the standard issue rifle, and again, I'm comparing it to the standard issue because I think it would be smarter to go in order of how you would unlock these. So a normal person playing, if you're just going through the weapons normally, you're going to have the base, you know, standard rifle, and then you're going to unlock the A280, and then you're going to unlock the CR2, so that's just how I'm going to do it. But compared to the standard issue, I feel like the standard issue, the base blaster, does do more damage to specifically heroes, which again, if you're playing Supremacy and other modes, you know, heroes are a big thing. I feel like it does do a little bit more damage to heroes, but the A280 still holds its own against heroes and can do a decent amount of damage. And one of the big things that I feel like it does excel at, especially if you put on the improved range, is against vehicles. Damage against vehicles, I didn't talk about that, I'm pretty sure. I think I forgot to talk about it in my last video about the standard issue blaster, but vehicle damage is pretty important, I feel like. Obviously, you know, tanks and ground vehicles are a bit more harder to do damage to because they're just a bit more tankier, whereas, you know, starfighters and stuff, I feel like you're able to do a little bit more damage. They don't have as much health. Maybe that's just placebo, I don't know. But starfighters, I feel like I'm able to do a lot of damage to them depending on the map you're playing and whatnot. So especially if you put on the improved range, so if you're wanting to do a lot of damage to starfighters and stuff, or they're really causing you a problem, put on the A280, put on the improved range, and just 3 burst them. You're going to do a lot of damage, especially if they're getting close to the ground. You could easily just scoop them up, get a free kill there, do a lot of damage to them. Even so, against ground vehicles like some tanks and stuff, you could easily do a decent amount of damage to them. If you're just out of the way, you know, obviously they're not, you know, if you're just playing right, you can do damage and honestly just help your team a lot. It's probably not the AR that's going to do the most damage against vehicles, but it does do a decent amount, and I'll give that a, you know, a bit of a one up there. And again, mods, you know, it has the 3 mods like all the others, and I feel like the improved range mod is a bit of a necessity for this. Just maintaining that high damage over greater distance is such a one up that you have with this. It's almost like it's kind of a need, you know. It's not really a want, it's a bit of a need on this. Again, you could use it without it, you know, when you're first unlocking the rifle, or the blaster I should say, you know, you could use it and still have a decent experience with it. But once you get that improved range, I personally maybe, you know, it doesn't do a whole lot, maybe it's not as amazing as I think it is, but from my personal experience of using it, I felt like it did help me maybe win more fights, do more damage, at least from what I saw. Maybe I just played better, maybe my matches were just better that I had with it on. But for me, IMO, I felt like it was a huge improvement. And if you were to use this thing, personally, my loadout with this is improved range and, you know, just the improved cooling. But maybe you want to be able to deal with people at a longer range. Maybe you want to sit back and play a more medium to long range role, then you can throw on the improved range with dual zoom. I could see people doing that. Personally, I just don't use that. I don't use the zoom. I don't really have a need for it, so I just use the cooling and the improved range, and I get my kicks with that. Again, now we can move on to, you know, different ranges and distances. For this, I want to kind of describe how it feels at different ranges, and I already talked about this, so I'm going to glance over it one more time. Short range, you might be able to get caught out by some people, you know, here and there, depending on what you're using. You know, heavy weapon users, you could kind of deal with them. People using LMGs, are they even called LMGs in this game? No, they're called heavy blasters. Of course they are. You get what I'm saying if I refer to it. If I say a LMG, I'm referring to heavy blasters. Compared to a heavy blaster, I think it's weird because I feel like at close range, you're going to be able to kill a heavy blaster user pretty quickly if they're on their own. If they have teammates with them, you got to be a little bit careful because they might be able to ramp up and get on you quick. But if you're close enough to them at short range, I feel like you could take them out pretty easily. At medium range, you're going to have to be a little bit more cautious. You can take some shots at them, but for me, sometimes if they know where you are and they're aiming at you and trying to gun you down, you got to be a little bit more careful. You know, I will be hiding behind cover, they'll be shooting at me, you know, you could peek up, try to get some shots off, but they really tank that damage, you know, because they are a heavy player, so you got to be cautious of that with their weapons. But again, it does really excel at medium range, and like I said, long range, you're going to be able to outplay majority of people at long range, except for the sniper players. The sniper players are going to have that one up on you. Even if you do a bunch of damage to them, they're just going to end up probably getting you with a one shot or something eventually, or, you know, they just have to hit you twice and you're basically gone. So you got to be wary of that, the longer range, but it could excel at that if you want to use it at that range. It is very possible. And again, it is a 3-burst weapon, so you gotta, you know, remember that. You can't just hold the trigger and it shoots for you. Maybe you can on controller, but I'm on keyboard and mouse, holding left click, it'll just fire once and that's it. You have to keep clicking left click for it to, you know, fire 3 bursts repeatedly, just so you know. But other than that, I think it's a really, really decent weapon. I've had an enjoyable time with it, especially after getting the improved range mod. I feel like it's added a decent more bit of damage for me, especially at longer ranges, and I've been able to get more kills with it and stuff. But again, that could just be personal preference. And yeah, that about wraps it up for the A280. It's a solid overall weapon. I wouldn't call it a direct upgrade to the standard issue blaster, you know, depending on how you just want to play. You know, I don't think it replaces the standard issue blaster. You could still use that and have an enjoyable experience with it if you want. Personally, I think I prefer the A280 over it, but sometimes you just want to have a more classic Star Wars experience and, you know, role play a bit more to an extent. Maybe you could use a standard issue, but overall it is still a decent blaster and you could have some fun with it. So that's all I have to say about it. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, whatever, and obviously in my next video I will be going over the CR2, so if you're interested in that, let me know, I guess. See you in the next one.